This is a diagram of the system for the electrolysis of water developed by Dr. James Patterson. This system is unique in that it is a closed-loop continuous circulation system that uses either light or heavy water as the flowing electrolyte. The electrolyte flows through the entire system and comes in direct contact with the electrode, allowing high current densities and high energy fluxes within the cell. The design of the system allows inline or online diagnostic testing without removing the cell from a production array. There are obvious cost benefits to this system. It utilizes light or ordinary water as the electrolyte and minute amounts of precious materials in the electrodes. The flow design is superior from an engineering standpoint, signifying a promising scale-up for commercial purposes. The electrolyte is drawn into the circulation system from a cooled feed reservoir by means of a constant volume, stroke rate controlled pump. The medium, or water, is transferred by high-pressure Teflon tubing using stainless steel connectors. The pressure of the system is continuously monitored by a pressure gauge connected in line. The medium then flows through a stainless steel filter containing a cellulose acetate screen. This removes any colloidal materials in the medium and allows the composition of the electrolyte to be monitored at all times. The Patterson power cell shown here has already been scaled up to 4 times its original experimental size. With each scale-up, we have seen significant increases in the relative heat that is being generated, as well as other operating characteristics. The research cell is composed of non-conducting industrial-strength glass that is 1.9 centimeters in diameter and 6 centimeters in total length. The heat-producing reaction takes place inside the microsphere bed, which is less than 2 centimeters in length. This small area produces extremely high-energy densities. Notice that the design allows for compression at both ends of the cell. This is done in order to get uniform microsphere bed packing in the cell, which is a vital step in the production of excess heat. O-rings are fitted around these movable non-conductive ends, which are compressed by means of plates and screws on the outside of the cell. Temperatures are measured at both ends of the cell by glass-encased J-type thermocouples that are in direct contact with the flowing medium. Contacts are mounted on platinum screens forming the cathode and the anode. The contacts extend from inside the cell and are connected to a constant current power supply having both positive and negative terminals. Input and output temperature, current, and voltage are carefully measured and recorded on a multi-point strip chart recorder. A backup measurement of current and voltage is also recorded. The electrolyte is composed of light water and 1 to 2 molar lithium sulfate, depending on cell resistivity. The medium enters the cell and then directly contacts the coated microspheres, producing an excess heat reaction. Heated water then exits above the cell. The circulation of the electrolyte through the cell allows for high current densities and energy fluxes within the cell with no complications. The cell design allows for increased conductivity of the electrolyte after hydrogen loading. A significant benefit of the system is that the flowing electrolyte can be used as the heat-to-energy transfer mechanism. The coated microspheres are the highly specialized catalysts for the excess heat-producing reaction. Clean Energy Technologies has focused a large portion of its research on the development of these microspheres and now has 2 patents that specifically cover their use, design, and the substitution of other materials. Using a complex plating process, various metals can be substituted or combined to produce effective results. This diagram illustrates the nickel-palladium-nickel configuration, which is effective in our light water system. This is the microsphere before the plating process begins. The base of the microsphere is composed of cross-linked styrene divinyl benzene, a stable cross-linked copolymer that can withstand extremely high temperatures. In this example, copper chloride is added to form a strong bond with the polystyrene substrate by exchanging hydrogen ions with the copper metal salts. This creates a microsphere with a thin copper flash coating that performs uniform catalytic functions without creating hotspots that would otherwise blow the metal coatings off. Various metal coatings are now applied to the conductive microspheres. A nickel coating of micron size is added by means of an electroplating electrolysis process. Then a micron size layer of palladium is added by either the electroplating or the electrolysis process. Finally, an outer layer of nickel is added by the electrolysis process. This microsphere design allows for extremely short charging times at low current. The normal charging time is approximately 4 hours at 0.05 amps for this microsphere configuration. Because of the geometry and the use of many microspheres in the form of a bed, a large surface area is created upon which the reaction takes place. The microspheres utilize less than 1% of the amount of palladium used in other electrolytic cells of comparable size. Another property of the coated bead is its ability to withstand both compression and expansion forces of over 30,000 atmospheres of pressure during the heat production process, allowing it to maintain its structural integrity. In addition, as pressure is applied to the beads in the system, their sublimation temperature rises significantly higher than 250 degrees Celsius. This is the temperature at which the beads change from a solid to a gas, at 14.7 pounds per square inch. This fault-tolerant system allows for several microspheres to fail without significantly affecting the cell's heat production. Also, there is a natural fail-safe characteristic built into the system that will shut it down if temperatures rise above specific levels. After the medium leaves the cell, it passes through a liquid-gas splitter. This device enables the flow of hydrogen and oxygen to be measured independently of the liquid flow. These results are monitored by a gas flow meter. The liquid flow rate is measured in the laboratory by means of a graduated cylinder and a stopwatch. The medium is then returned to the feed reservoir without changes to its composition. At this point, the medium is very hot. Prior to re-entering the system, the temperature of the medium is reduced to its original level by a cooling unit at the feed reservoir. In a practical device, the heat or steam produced would be converted directly into other forms of energy. The engineering benefits of the flow system, the capacity to produce enough excess heat to generate steam, the limited use of raw materials, and the positive environmental impact of creating energy with ordinary water will ultimately dictate that this system, or one very similar to it, will be an economic necessity in the future. The results that SETI has achieved have been very impressive. The Patterson power cell using light water repeatedly produces excess heat yields of over 1,000% at low currents and 250% and above at high currents. That is to say, for every 1 watt that is put into the system, at least 2½ watts are recorded exiting the cell. These results are 100% reproducible. In addition, there have been many individual runs that have significantly exceeded 500% at the higher currents. Here we see the gases and the liquid as they exit the cell. The medium is actually turned into steam due to the high temperatures that are created. Over the past several months, SETI has worked with several individuals and institutions that have independently verified these results. SETI has focused its aggressive research on a system that can be economically scaled up to commercial power levels. SETI is scaling up the size and efficiency of the cell and expects to produce 1 kilowatt of power as part of a larger 250 kilowatt power array. To achieve a more rapid advancement of this technology, SETI is selling research and development licenses for specific applications. Cells and beads will be available to those who have serious interest in purchasing research and development licenses. SETI is also actively seeking strategic partners to join us in the development and commercialization of this exciting new technology. The ramifications of this discovery are profound. It will have a direct impact on every individual, home, industry, and every mode of transportation. SETI invites you to join us in our journey as we move toward the fulfillment of the human quest for a clean, unlimited, economical energy source.
Well, they far outdone themselves. The cell that they said they were going to get a kilowatt, and they got it. Of course, that's a factor not of 10 to 1, as was in the earlier, that industrial film is old. That tape, by the way, was at the Monte Carlo conference in Monaco in April of 95, okay, this year. But now, of course, they have 100,000%. Am I correct on my zeros? These zeros are getting quite impressive. Let's be careful. It's 1,000 to 1, which you multiply by 100, or 100,000 to 1. 100,000%, excuse me, 100,000%. But I will tell you, my good friends, that there is a phenomenon which was documented by Pons and Fleischmann in Physics Letters A in 1993 when they turned their cells off. After the water boiled off, you'll see the boil off on one of the films too close to the sun. They have the so-called heat after death phenomenon. In other words, after turning it off, the reaction persists, and the heat went on for hours. CT does not like to have this talked about too much, but I know for a fact that they can turn their cells off after they're properly triggered and initiated, and there is no input power. The input power on several tests, one test now let's understand what this, we're going to talk now about what happened this week, the Pearl Harbor of the fossil fuel age, December 7th, 1995, almost a century after the discovery of X-rays in November of 1895, which upset everything a little bit. That was an industrial meeting. They were not there to convince the hot fusion physicists, the people on the email, the forums, or anything. There were some flaws in the general hubbub of things, but overall there's no doubt about what was seen there. Okay? And we'll explain it, we'll go through one by one. But what they did is they had an exhibit, as you saw on the slides. They took it periodically to the hotel room where they could talk to some very large industrial partners that are lining up now to get these research partnerships and licensing fees. They showed them like a 5-hour run here and a 4-hour run there. They didn't have it running continuously, as they did, by the way, at the recent meeting in October, at the hot fusion meeting in Illinois. They had the cell running at 80 to 1, 800%. Where is that? Where is that article? 80 to 1. Yeah, there it is. In this latest issue, Jed Rothwell's description of how they went to a hot fusion meeting, and there were exhibitors of various kinds, and they demonstrated a cell putting 5 watts out with 0.06 watts going in. With full flow meters, thermocouples, it ran for 4 days at 80 to 1. That's the end of the hot fusion process, as far as I'm concerned. Not that that's an irrelevant question of hot fusion. It's a silly thing to even talk about, but they have been bad people in this field. Let's go back to let's talk about what was exhibited. Let's go right through the various equipment. Very interesting. Now, I wasn't there, so I'm relying on my excellent colleague, Jed Rothwell, who saw this and told me secondhand exactly what's going on. I'm missing my pointer. If someone sees the pointer lying around, you got it? Good, I like it. I like to use a pointer. Okay, this is just a tabletop. It almost looks like a science fair experiment, and in effect it is. But isn't that something, if you look back in history, Michael Faraday's equipment didn't look half as good as this. And what did it do? It turned, it's like electricity. It turned the whole age around. This will do the same thing. I'm sure we'll put this in the Smithsonian at some point. By the way, is it possible to turn those, well, okay, leave those lights on. Might make the contrast a little better. Let's focus in on particulars here. I have a little closer upper here. Yeah, let's describe what's going on here. Now, this is a real cell. The cell actually is inside. You can't really, there is tubing, large gauge plastic tubing as a protector, because the rules of the conference were, if you have something that's very hot, you don't want people grabbing it and getting burned. So you have to have this tube, this external tube is irrelevant. It's just a protector. Inside this foam padding insulation is the cell, just like you saw in the film, a little bigger, 1 inch in diameter, about 4 inches long, with 40 cubic centimeters of beads, new design beads, which they are being tight-lipped about for now. I suspect that they are ceramic, designed to go to very high temperatures. I suspect they are, but I'm not sure. I don't know what they are. All I know is that it's still light water and lithium sulfate electrolyte. No heavy water particularly. Okay, the water is pumped through. Here's an aquarium pump. Just an aquarium pump. By the way, with one of those magnetic operations, so that the impeller part of the pump, you know, is not connected to the electric part. It's perfectly clean. It doesn't go through, no danger of hurting the motor. So you just pump the water through. It's just a flow system. Now, by the way, in case anyone is super skeptical, could this pump create 1,000 watts of power? No way. They wanted to close that little loophole off. They had simple power meters hooked right into the AC line. The entire AC power of the pump, the electronic instrumentation, all these things, everything else, the cell itself with its puny little microscopic amount of power consumption, was all monitored at a central location, and the total wattage going in was something like 70 or 80 watts total. But don't be fooled. That has nothing to do, of course, with the real input power, of course, to the fundamental process. Yeah, you could do this by convection or by many other means. You know, the pump power is not part of the process. The process is the delta T across the flow volume times the flow rate times the specific heat of water, and that's the 1,000 to 1. The fundamental process is 1,000 to 1. Yes, the auxiliary pumps may be more. Who cares? It's still 16 to 1. Okay? So, you know, this is hot. This is a, you know, if anyone had heard, oh yeah, they did 16 to 1, they would have been happy, right? But they really did 1,000 to 1 or more. There's James Patterson that you've seen. He lives in Sarasota, Florida, by the way. He doesn't want to get involved in all this business stuff. He's turned it over to his grandson. He just wants to fish. Got plenty of money. Had dinner with him out in Monte Carlo. This is Jed Rothwell, my colleague, contributing editor to the magazine. Patterson, his grandson, and that's Dr. Tom Passel of the Electric Power Research Institute, one of the good guys in cold fusion. There are bad guys against cold fusion at EPRI. The EPRI program, all the EPRI programs have been cut back in all areas. So cold fusion has been cut back. But Tom still gets a nice salary for working on cold fusion. Most of the work that he used to support from EPRI, millions of dollars a year, is now being funded by Japan. SRI International is now being funded by the Japanese New Hydrogen Energy or Cold Fusion Organization. But he was there at the conference. There were many other cold fusion people too, and there were some good hot fusion people too from General Atomics who are very interested in this. General Atomics of San Diego is very interested in cold fusion. They know the writing's on the wall. No one's going to build tokamaks, therefore they better get into something new because they, you know, there's some sharp people there who know what's going on. There's an instrumentation again. Here's the close-up of the cells, and you have I think the cathode is at the bottom, the anode is at the top. You know, the current conductivity goes through the water, through the layers, you know, circuitously, through the layers of material on the cells. You know, the beads. The beads touch each other. It must be a very complicated process. I'm not presuming to give the exact dynamics of it, but obviously there are some very interesting things going on in such a fluidized type bed. Not literally fluidized, but sort of looking like a fluidized bed. Yes, it's contact on the bottom, like a screen at the bottom and a screen at the top. So you have a platinum, you have a screen at the bottom and a screen at the top. Yeah. For total conductivity, whether the new cell design has it going across or vertical, I don't know. You can well imagine, use your imagination. They can use all kinds of geometries, and they probably will, and this will become sort of a universal process. This is the business end, so to speak, where the heat comes out. It's kind of funny in a way. A little muffin fan, you know, the kind that you have here in the TV to blow hot air out of your TV. When it pulls the air out. Put your hand over there, and there's a blast of hot air. does not equal 8 volts in to the cell and 0.1 in one test, where it was going at a 1.344 kilowatts, does not equal 0.18 amps, which was on the meter, and 8 volts. That's 1.44 watts. You don't get a Christmas light creating a hairdryer. Simple as that. And that's the fundamental fact of this whole experiment. And if it goes long enough, it's megajoules per, whatever, okay? It's a kilowatt per hour. 1,000 watts times 3,600 seconds in an hour is what? 3.6 megajoules, right? And you go 5 hours, and then you're up to, several tens of megajoules. So the whole thing is obviously a profound reaction. Much as we don't want to believe it, or some people don't want to believe it, it's there. It's just a simple high school calorimetry. These are the holes where the air comes in, goes through this tubing. I wish they had made it a little prettier, but it's kind of nice that it's crude, just like Michael Faraday's experiment, Galileo's experiment. All these things that started off very simple that changed the world. Goddard's rocket, the Wright brothers' Flappy thing, and Kitty Hawk. There's the whole setup. They ran out and they bought a bottle, I don't even know what this is, Aquafine it's called, water. What's it used for? In film, what? Aquafine it was called. They needed some, they didn't bring along, this was all very rushed. And they brought it all along and just, get some distilled water. Oh, here's some Aquafine, throw it in. I love it. In fact, the cruder it is, the better it is. And it's in a way good that there were a few glitches. One glitch was that the control cell, which you saw, seemed to be producing at one point a delta T across the beads, all right? In other words, they suddenly saw 2.6 degrees across the beads, which would be a high power, 100 watts or 200 watts. And so that gives the skeptic something to yell about. It turns out that there's some unknown glitch so far in that. Believe me, Dr. Cravens, who knows what he's doing, saw a delta T of 0 at some time before this whole thing came here or while it was there, 0 delta T across the control cell of ordinary shot, lead shot coated with tin or something. It was thrown in there. They probably should never have brought a control cell, because if you fail the control cell, as they did apparently, and get an apparent excess, then the skeptics say, you're getting energy out of shotgun shells now. This is impossible. You're fools. Goodbye. And so it's a nice trap to let them go yelling and screaming for another few more weeks or months. They'll have fun with that. They're funny people. That's it. And there's the fan. I guess more and more of the same thing. Oh, here's when it was reading 8.5 volts across. No, that was delta T. I'm sorry. That was one time when it was a delta T. Oh yeah, write this down. 8.5 delta T, C, across the bed, and 0.023 amps going in. And my colleague told me, I can't confirm this, but this was the one where the power at that time, the voltage at that time was 9 volts, I think. So it's 9 times the 0.023, or something like 0.1, wait a minute, 9 times that would be a very low power, indeed, like about 0.18 watts going in, 0.2 of a watt going in. The 8.5 delta T was, the flow rate at that time was about a liter per minute. The whole thing it's about a liter per minute type system. More details. Here's, what was this? This was, wait a minute. This was 0.66 amps, just showing, there's 120 volts going into the whole system, wall current, wall power. And, the motor, everything is 0.66 amps. So a fraction of a 100-watt light bulb to operate the entire system and get this miraculous effect. Just to be sure that everyone knew the wall was being measured, they stuck what is it? There's the Radio Shack meter showing, 120 volts. But before this is the culminating cold fusion experiment that ends everything, as far as I'm concerned. Because right after this, I think what you're going to see real soon are public announcements. I don't know exactly what the time scale is, but certain major corporations are getting involved now. Whether they fully sign aboard remains to be seen, so I don't want to have to eat my words. I would just predict that within the next 6 weeks, maybe a lot sooner, you will see major U.S. corporations, I'm talking Fortune 500 level. I happen to know the name of one such corporation, who's likely to sign on or have already signed on. And when that corporation is announced, that's it, right? You know? They know what they're going to do. But, yes?
Do those beads have to be renewed periodically?
They get better and better with time, I understand. But that remains to be seen. Remember, this is demonstration level, but it is not yet, of course, you know, here's a product that we can put into anyone's house and guarantee that the beads will last, you know, umpteen months or years. My feeling, the likelihood is, in my opinion, is that you will see these beads not degrading. My intuition tells me that, but I know from nothing. Maybe they have to be replaced. But it's a very small amount of material. And by the way, the power level coming out is such that the power density in the metal layer is on the order of kilowatts per cubic centimeter. Many kilowatts per cubic centimeter in a flow stream. Okay? It is a highly intense reaction in the metal regime, in the metal layer. The total power density is like tens of watts, you know, 30, 40 watts per cubic centimeter. That's big news. Very powerful. Yeah.
What was it that you left implied when you said you know what would happen in a large corporation?
Oh, when a large corporation is involved, since the goalpost kept getting moved, the thing that will allow for the first time what we have not had, we have not had enough credibility with the media, okay, let's say, so that the media feel comfortable writing about this. However, when a large corporation must tell its public, its stockholders, what it's just done, it has now invested its money into a company in Texas called Clean Energy Technologies that's involved with coal fusion, and must tell its stockholders that. The business writers must write about that. Must. Okay, the very first thing, if anyone should criticize them, will be this company will be called foolish and stupid, and by some, you know, uninformed sources, and the whole thing will come out publicly. Everyone will focus in on it. Business Week will write about it. So, you know, it's going to really change things, I think. Won't end the fossil fuel age overnight, but it will create a big splash.
No, but will the lawyers of the large corporation then go around and stop all small corporations to try to sell products?
Small corporations? What do you mean?
The small businesses who try to get products to the market because the large corporations, while they're only interested in selling large clients.
Oh, no. Oh, by the way, I'll tell you one thing that will make you happy. This corporation that I know of that is the most likely to be the first on board and publicized is not an energy company. It is not an energy company. So it is not like Texaco buying in and trying to squash it. Yeah.
In the movie Too Close to the Sun,
Yep.
there's something about an agent of power companies buying up all patents around the world.
No. Eneco is buying up all the patents. They are a coal fusion company in Utah. Their idea for a company, Eneco, is buying all the patents as much as they can to get an umbrella coverage. They have the Pons-Fleischmann patent under their umbrella. Okay, by the way, the SETI business plan, this is very important for any of those who have connections, who might want to get into business. I certainly am tempted with colleagues. All you need is SETI is a young company now, right? $1 million will buy you a license, a non-exclusive license to develop any technology you want that will use their beads, renewable every year for, $500,000 per year, which would be enormous if you can't make sales, okay? But if you were to, my thought is, immediately go out and make a 2 kilowatt room heater, right? Make a 2 or 3 kilowatt room heater, package it up industrially, get a license from SETI, and run with it. That's a business. Make a furnace for a house to replace, some few tens of kilowatts, and, throw it in the basement, sell it for, who knows, $10,000. People would gladly pay that to eliminate their oil delivery, even if they had to borrow the money. At $5,000, you couldn't make them fast enough. Okay? So there are many, many business opportunities. I'm sure they will be tried. Let's go back and revisit the older days, though, of the evidence. Sorry to do this, but this was there on the table before SETI. This was there, that a certain current density in these, this is Storms provided me with this, at a certain critical amps per centimeter square on the palladium system, we give these various watts per cubic centimeter energy density, watts per centimeter square, off the cathode. It was clear that there was a phenomenon here, and it was following certain rules. You couldn't do it below here, and you did it over here, and there were certain things that were going on. And look at this. This was a summary of all the production of energy as a function of excess power in watts in all these experiments that SRI did at different loading ratios of deuterium to palladium. Look at it. It's going up in a prescribed way. There's a phenomenon there. There's a phenomenon. Okay, this is why the whole business of cold fusion is nonsense makes no sense, because good scientists like Mike McCoubrey, very conservative man, okay, and great that we had him, found these things that were happening. This was very systematic. Here's from Kunimatsu in, Hosogawa et al. At Imra. Right, Kunimatsu's there too. Different types of systems, different power ratios. Let's see, D to PD ratio. They found this too on the composition. They found a similar effect. This was found very early on. This was SRI. You'll see this in Too Close to the Sun. They found at SRI that they got an autoradiograph through two thick layers of film, and there was some fogging. By the way, in one of the issues, the third issue of our magazine, Dr. Srinivasan of Bob Atomic Research Center shows how you too can do this with loading. You load a palladium wire, and you will absolutely reproducibly get film fogging of unknown ionizing radiation origin, he believes. There was that, and Bob Atomic Research Center had done, they had done some other types of cold fusion experiments. There was another example of an autoradiograph from a gas discharge experiment. They had that early on. This has been around for a long time now. I mean, this is a 7-year war we've had, now ending. Tritium activity, Bacchus et al. At Texas A&M. Remember, Bacchus was crucified by Taubes as having done fraud. It was all circumstantial evidence. There was no evidence of fraud. It has been now clearly stated, clearly concluded that there could not have been any fraud, but the perception of fraud still continues. John Huizenga of the DOE panel repeated Taubes' accusation. It is a disgrace. It is outrageous, and we will take care of Mr. Taubes eventually. He'll be one of those who will be very sorry when this cold fusion war comes to its conclusion. He is unrepentant, they all are, and those who are unrepentant will be dealt with. They should be, because this should not ever happen again. What if it happened in a medical? It probably is happening. It is. What if? It is happening in medical discoveries whereby critical medical life-saving therapies are ridiculed and railroaded out of town just because a certain establishment doesn't like it and calls it quackery or fraud. Hopefully that will change as a result of cold fusion. So cold fusion is much more important than just the energy source, which would be enough. But to get rid of and to smash the scientific establishment, it deserves to be smashed. A lot of the stuff that it does is very good, don't get me wrong. I'm a man of the establishment in some sense, but I don't agree with what its behavior has been. I just think that this is going to be a salutary lesson in the history of science. More tritium. This is at Los Alamos National Laboratory. This is tritium production, reproducible in various experiments, way above background, okay, changing with the various currents and so forth. And it's in a Los Alamos National Laboratory report. Isn't this interesting? One of our laboratories is producing tritium, which is an ingredient to hydrogen bombs. The director of the laboratory is doing absolutely nothing about this. We are still talking with the Department of Energy. They're talking about reactivating nuclear reactors and other methods of producing tritium. Meanwhile, right there it's being done, and no one is acknowledging it, and that is criminal. If that happened during wartime operations, during, let's say we're at war with a country, we needed hydrogen bombs, silly kind of a statement, but anyone who would get in the way of the understanding and the dissemination of that knowledge within the military forces would be convicted as a traitor to the United States. Okay? But it's not a war, so therefore it's par for the course and doable. Reduced radioactivity of tritium in small titanium particles. Isn't that amazing? That work done 30 years ago by Reifenschweiler at the Phillips Laboratory showing the decrease of tritium counts with temperature. Radioactivity is not supposed to change with temperature. They went back to look at their old data. They knew that it was strange back then. Now, with Pons and Fleischmann, all this old stuff is coming out. And look at this, my friends. Tritium counts going along. Here's temperature degrees C. And then suddenly, at a mid-range between 100 and 200 degrees C, the counts start going down. Not supposed to happen. One would think initially, oh, the tritium is leaving. You know, tritium is being discharged. Well, he kept a pressure probe on for the tritium pressure, and the tritium pressure did not start going up and thus being removed from the system until much later. It came down, and then the counts went up again. Incredible. Astonishing. It's now all but certain that radioactivity is influenced by temperature. I hate to say this. It is influenced and destroyed, perhaps, in certain processes. This is a very heretical thing. This is pure alchemy. It is not supposed to happen. Quantum mechanics and other things say radioactivity is a stable clock. We are in danger of losing some of our clocks now. I do not trust all. I mean, I pretty much trust carbon-14 dating and other dating, but now things are going to have to be considered again. You know, this is very, very scary business. That something that is so rigid as, dating by radioactivity can now be called into question legitimately. Because if one single experiment on Earth shows that radioactivity can be changed by temperature, as that one does, are you going to believe other experiments for sure? Aren't you going to feel a little scared about whether it might be off? It might be. This one, Will, the head of the National Cold Fusion Institute, deceased institute, okay, because of the politics in Utah, they had fully reproducible tritium. This was in 1993, but of course they got the results in 1991, 2, and so forth. 91. They closed down in 91. They had this. Reproducible tritium. This was by a guy formerly from the GE Research Laboratories, an impeccable electrochemist, very precise Austrian chap, very ambiguous about excess heat, but totally willing to say, we created tritium, in a paper in the Journal of Electroanalytical Chemistry. And here's Mike McCool. Let's see, what's this? Oh, there's helium results. Helium reports keep coming up. Miles at the Naval Air Surface Weapons Center in the Journal of, where is this? Oh, Fusion Technology, probably. The probability of all his data being due to random errors, that is, the helium coordination level with the excess heat or lack of excess heat, the probability Dr. Miles assigned to that was 1 out of 134 million, 217,730. Almost a vanishingly small probability that his results of helium appearing or not appearing came out. Excellent man, very careful. Low power levels, small helium ratios. Equus Sciences has much more. Here's a heat burst in temperature that was obtained at SRI. This exists. I mean, this is really a temperature excursion that suddenly occurred. You know, these thermometers didn't malfunction, okay? I mean, this is real stuff. This is on the record. This has been going on. Here's the patent of Piantelli with just a nickel rod and ordinary hydrogen, not even heavy hydrogen. No products found. He has gotten gamma rays off, though. He has gotten gamma rays. The experiment is simply an evacuated chamber with pumps and monitors, and they tried hydrogen and heavy hydrogen. It's very strange, very strange. By the way, they got into it by the back door. They saw some unusual things occurring in medical experiments involving, no, I've forgotten now actually what it was. Some interesting effects whereby heat on a biological sample on nickel was not going away. And they were in cryogenic temperatures and they couldn't cool it. They couldn't keep it cool. And they thought, oh my God, maybe there's something unusual here. Oh, maybe Pons-Fleischmann effect. They trigger it, they go up a temperature profile, input power, then they do something, magnetic fields or whatever, and they get the same power nickel temperature. They're able to sustain it at a lower heater input power. When they start getting excess, they get watts of excess power. If you believe calorimetry, see this line across here? Here's the same temperature, or that is power level, created by a different input power, a lower input power, after they trigger the reaction. It's very strange. You'll have to read the paper they published in Il Nuovo Cemento. Oh, Dr. Miley, who's in hot fusion, and he's the editor of this magazine, they tried layers of various kinds in little cells, and they got pretty much what a lot of other people are getting, kilowatts per cubic centimeter in the layers, 10 kilowatts per cubic centimeter. This is the man, I didn't bring his results. This is Kevin Wolf, one of the terrible skeptics of cold fusion, actually one of the original finders of cold fusion effects. Then he got terrorized by the whole thing, and so he retracted his tritium results. He shouldn't have. He got these anomalous gamma ray spectra, which are shown in, which one did we show it in? Oh yeah, here it is. We published it for him. He was unwilling to publish it, so we just did him a favor. We didn't get sued yet. I'm sure he'll just keep his mouth shut. These were EPRI curves in any event. They were shown publicly at ICCF 5. Where are they? Oh, here. Okay? These are Dr. Wolf's gamma spectra. Many very sharp gamma lines indicating radioactive isotopes that were created in a Pons-Fleischmann cell. He hasn't been able to reproduce it, by the way. He thinks they're due to weakly interacting cosmic particles. He can't, massive particles. He can't bring himself to think that this was a cold fusion effect. He can only get out of it by privately saying that he believes it's some sort of a weird particle. This is nonsense. This is from a cold fusion experiment, simple as that. Nothing from space, just from cold fusion. And that's the Griggs cell, which is of Hydrodynamics Incorporated. A motor, this is their sales literature. It's a heat company. They sell these things. You can buy one for $10,000. They put these in buildings, and buildings have reported saving energy. I mean, 10, 20% on the electric bill. Okay, electricity goes in. It's a way of having no fossil fuel in your building, which could save you insurance rates because, if you don't have fossil fuel, you don't have the danger. So therefore, it's a neat device even if it weren't over unity, but it is over unity. A very high horsepower motor, 30, 40, 50 horsepower, rotates something inside there. It's a cylinder with holes in it that creates ultrasonic sound, bubbles, God knows what else. I'm not saying I know what's in there. I'll describe the experiment we did. It just circulates the water. This just turns the rotor, and an auxiliary pump. Where is the pump? There is an auxiliary pump that pumps it around, circulates it, okay, into heating coils with blowers and so forth. But the essence is there the delta T going in here and out here, producing the hot water, is that producing more energy than is going in mechanically? It's a simple question. You can ask that question. And the answer that we found when we went down to visit him, we're not the only ones that found this. It keeps on being found over and over again by other people too. Let me put that back up. We found when this is in the steam mode, this can create steam also. It's obviously steam because you see this big blast of steam coming out if you open the valve. We heated it up, we got it working in what James Griggs, the inventor, said was a proper mode. We had very good meters, most sophisticated meters that they sell for measuring three-phase motor power. the input electric power was recorded and added up electronically to get kilowatt hours, okay, during a 20-minute test, let's say. And we just had a barrel sitting on a scale, well calibrated. We calibrated it also. They calibrated it. It was 350 pounds of water, and you dump the steam line in at T0. Stick the steam line in, condense all the steam, watch the temperature rise in the barrel, 50 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit rise. You could immediately determine how many BTUs went in the barrel. And of course, we weren't being careful in terms of insulating the barrel and insulating the pipes. We just wanted to see roughly, is the heat in the barrel from the steam more than the electric power going in? And it was. So it must be about, say, 20, 30%, 40, whatever. These are big numbers. Not like 1%, 2%, tens of percent already over the input power. Now, given that the electric motor is about 15% inefficient, it's even better than you think. This was not the only such device. This device comes out of another device which we talk about in our magazine called the Schaefer device, which had a U.S. patent, that itself was reported on many occasions to produce excess energy. And you ask, why should simple plumbing like this do it, and why didn't we hear about this before? Very simple answer. No one was looking, or a few people were looking, and even if you showed it to somebody, they wouldn't believe it. Battelle was shown this. They saw it. They deep-sixed it. This was 20-some years ago. This has been around for a long time, people. It's only now coming to fruition only because of the cold fusion controversy. Here's something else to put on the table. I don't normally talk about this, but there it was in Business Week, May 8th, August 8th, 94. The Gunneman process. Caterpillar Corporation is on public record as supporting this. It is a fuel called A55. It has now been approved, by the way, by the state of Nevada. It is a mixture of 55% gasoline, 55% water with gasoline or fossil fuel, any other fossil fuel. They use naphtha now, which is, I think, lower, the chemical engineers, lower on the chain of production, so it's cheaper to make naphtha. It's 55% water. They put it in car engines. It's been tested in fleets, and it gives 30, 40, 50% more miles per gallon at a cleaner exhaust. So you cut down dramatically per gallon of fossil fuel component. All right? So it's a water fuel. They find they need nickel in the combustion chamber. Isn't that neat? Nickel needs to be in the combustion chamber to make it work. Is this cold fusion? Who knows? But it's mighty interesting when a company starts selling a fuel in the United States, it's 55% water. So we have the preeminent examples popping up all over now of excess energy and spectacularly increased energy. It is case closed that the oil age is going to end. It was my little contribution, proud of that. For a time we had a little money, very little always, it seems. I did some experiments on the Takahashi, Akihito Takahashi's cold fusion process. This was very fast. We did it. We thought we had excess heat. We're not sure we ever saw the excess heat. But what we did was we verified the calorimetry. We turned over some of these, these materials that we got from Japan to people who had more money, more time, more resources. Dr. Storms at Los Alamos National Laboratory, he verified the heat, duplicated it, peer-reviewed internal to Los Alamos National Laboratory, guaranteed excess heat out of this process which cycled the power. It was a pulsed input power situation. But we did a nice little effort in the basement in Bow, New Hampshire, where I live, near Concord, and it was fun. And the calorimetry holds up. It was clear that Takahashi in Japan knew what he was doing. It's clear that Storms knew what he was doing, and it's pretty much case closed that it is real. Let us take a break right now. We'll come back. We'll finish off. We'll do heavy Watergate quickly. We'll do some electric motor over Unity. I've already talked about the Grigg stuff. And then we'll have dessert. We'll see Too Close to the Sun. Let's do heavy Watergate really quickly. We've done a lot of the evidence. I think you're beginning to get the picture. But there was an incredible attack against cold fusion. I was the chief science writer at my alma mater, wayward alma mater, MIT. at the time, it provided a unique perspective. I had been there since September of '87, so I was a good man. And I was known as a nice fellow, a person who was happy with hot fusion. I mean, I was the one who introduced Ron Parker, the head of the $200,000 a year man, head of the Plasma Fusion Center. I introduced him to the Wall Street Journal 3 weeks before cold fusion broke. And I was proud of that because, you know, I was exposing hot fusion and how good hot fusion was going to be for the world. It was. I was always interested in hot fusion, but I didn't get much back from them later on. They turned against me, it turned out, behind my back in many cases. It all began on the night of April 30th, 1989. Remember, the announcement occurred, there was great disbelief, but polite discussions. Everything in the news media up to that point, up to May 1st, May Day of 1989, was politeness and sweetness. We will check it out, we will find, but behind the closed doors was a deliberate campaign to discredit the whole business because they didn't believe it from day one, and they knew their program was threatened desperately if this was right. Okay, on the night of April 30th, 1989, I got a late-night call from the head of the Plasma Fusion Center, a desperate call from Ronald Parker. He said to me, Gene, CBS News called me, and they said that the Boston Herald is going to write a report saying that I said that leading scientists at MIT derided breakthrough cold fusion experiment as scientific schlock, will release a report today charging 2 University of Utah chemists with misrepresentation and maybe fraud. Okay, Parker said to me, I did not say any of that. Of course, I certainly believed him. Well, the Herald was a tabloid, and I did not know Nick Tate at all. I later came to know him. Turns out that he had, Parker, he should have told me, I'm a representative of MIT in the news office, if he's going to design or engineer a big publicity thing, many professors do that, they design publicity campaigns for their own projects, he should have told me. It's not my job to stop him from talking to a reporter secretly. The Boston Globe, by the way, at the time, the competing newspaper, was being very positive about cold fusion, that it might well exist. It was still in a neverland of is it right or is it wrong? But Parker and his colleagues wanted to axe it. They had already done some experiments that convinced themselves that Pons and Fleischmann had completely screwed up, as they had, on their neutron measurements. And they even began to suspect that Pons and Fleischmann had shifted their curves, showing gamma curves, showing that there were 2.5 MeV or 2.45 MeV neutrons coming out. Okay? Whatever. They thought Pons and Fleischmann were sick and silly, and they had to get rid of this because it was detracting from their program, so they called in Tate. They asked Gene to write a news release at midnight, which I did, gladly, to the UPI, AP, and so forth, denying this report, saying he did not say fraud, he did not say schlock science. So I was used. And it was a complete fabrication. Parker had said all those things, and worse. Tate was actually pretty kind to Parker. Parker used the word fraud 5 times on the tape. I have the tape, by the way. He said, so what, and his sort of ending line with Tate was, you know, what are you going to do with this? So what you're hearing from us, Nick, is that we think this is a scam. That's what he said. So Tate reported it right on the nose. He was almost fired immediately. Fortunately, the tape was home by the editor of the because the newspaper would presume that the professor at MIT was not lying and his reporter was an incompetent boob. But it turned out that Tate was absolutely correct. To this day, Parker does not admit to what he said. There were subsequent radio broadcasts after I resigned from MIT in which he continues to deny. Now, you think that's just a little personal peek? No. That was the opening shot of the cold fusion war, where it became permissible in polite company to call Pons and Fleischmann frauds and schlock scientists and so forth. The next day at Baltimore, at the American Physical Society meeting, they were hung, Pons and Fleischmann, in absentia. Ridiculed. Numerous reports came out. Nate Lewis of Caltech gave him full blast. You know, on and on and on. This was Parker at the news conference, emergency news conference we had the next day to clarify things. The Herald the next day published the transcript. At the time, I didn't know. Parker told me, hey, this Tate is a viper. He said Tate is, you know, this is out of context, and I believed him. About a year later, I listened to the tape. Tate was right on the money. And the next book that I write will not be so kind to Parker and company, will be very, very harsh on that particular entity at MIT. They held a party for cold fusion, against cold fusion, on June 26, 1989, black armbands optional, sponsored by the Center for Contrived Fantasies. I declined to go to this. This was from the New Yorker. Don't you remember we were at Herb and Sally's, and Herb said he knew how to achieve fusion at room temperature only using gin and vermouth. This was before their data had been analyzed in the calorimetry experiment. So they didn't even have a conclusion on calorimetry yet, but they had a party against cold fusion. Okay? I found this later, much later, as my book was being finished. I was shuffling through papers, and I'm overwhelmed with information on cold fusion, and I come across these two curves, which was one of their July 10th. Remember, this is after the wake party. After the wake, in July. Okay? Weeks after June 26th. And there's the light water cell, and here's the heavy water cell. Okay? Parallel runs. They were run simultaneously. And clearly this cell appears to have, at least in this presentation of the data, excess heat. Doesn't prove cold fusion, but it says, hey, there's something interesting here, not interesting there. This is pretty much of a wash. So if you got data like that, you would say, let's go, boys, let's do it again, right? Minimum, if you're a scientist. If you're a politician, what you do is you shift your data and you publish it. This is what they did. They published this data, shifted, this is the light water averaged according to samples, that's okay, but then they shifted down the heavy water data so that this would look okay. And this was published in the Journal of Fusion Energy, which is edited at the MIT Plasma Fusion Center. The editor, talk about peer review, the editor at the don't confuse it with fusion technology. Journal of Fusion Energy is at this place working for Ronald Parker. Mr. Kahn was his name, or Dr. Kahn, nice name. Okay? So 3 days later, the data was shifted. It's much worse. A colleague of mine, Dr. Mitchell Swartz, found all the data shifted points. It was distorted. He found out you could not possibly get a linear transformation for what you know linear transformations. You could not go linearly from the raw data on the heavy water case to this. It doesn't work. So it was highly massaged. In my view, one of the worst cases of scientific misconduct in history, because it led to the suppression of a technology that for years, the deaths of many people needlessly due to air pollution, due to the delta T of this technology not being adopted soon enough. This was the press release denying it, which I signed on, and on the day I resigned, on June 7th, 1991, I publicly disavowed this release as a lie, which it is. It's a complete lie. Professor Ballinger in nuclear engineering at MIT, he made some very choice. At the day we started bombing Iraq, which was fine, I was all in favor of that, Baghdad, that is, he was giving a lecture. He's an ignorant man. I have to say this. He's so ignorant it's beyond belief. But he came out with one of the best anti-cold fusion statements. It would not matter to me if 1,000 other investigations were subsequently to perform experiments seeing excess heat. These results may be all correct, but it would be an insult to these investigators to connect them with Pons and Fleischmann. In other words, it could be real, but they're so bad and terrible, it's impossible to give them any credit at all. As though MIT, the great MIT, I wear the ring proudly still, somewhat less proudly at this point, because this is what the head of the physics department said when he called up in the spring of 89, and 91. Two physicists, hot fusion people, one of them, had a new theory of cold fusion. They had been invited by Professor Hagelstein in electrical engineering to talk at MIT. He called the news office and said, how did these flakes get on campus? This man is now the Dean of Science at MIT. Parker, on the day I resigned, I showed these curves in public. The way it happened was, I knew that everything was doomed at MIT. They'd shifted the data. My book was coming out. The article for Technology Review had been canceled. It was a terrible place to be. I didn't want to represent this place anymore. I wanted to be free to speak out, and I'm glad I quit. They called in Dr. Frank Close, who wrote the book Too Hot to Handle. okay, from England. They didn't even tell me that the speaker was coming. They knew I was writing a book and had written it and it was ready to come out, but they secretly called another speaker in. They didn't even give me equal time or even a fraction of the time. Not that I really cared all that much, but I went to the lecture. And at that lecture, listening to 45 minutes of Frank Close talking about the fraud, that's the whole point of his book, Too Hot to Handle, that Pons and Fleischmann shifted their gamma curves. So they're fraudulent and everyone else is good. After listening to 45 minutes of that, I said, look, here are the curves. I put them on the wall. I said, Frank, why don't you write this up in your book on the next time? It was as though I wasn't there. Parker, who claims he never saw those raw curves, and probably he didn't. A lower echelon guy shifted the data. This is what he said in public, and I have it on tape too. I'll tell you what my opinion is of that work because I was part of it, and I don't think it's worth very much. That's why it's just published in a tech report. I don't think it's worth very much. And that's why I don't put any stock at all. You can redraw those curves any way you want. I don't think the data is worth anything. The data was not worth anything, according to him, on that day, but it has been used explicitly by the United States Patent Office to say that the effect doesn't exist. And if you want to talk about the most genuine form of fraud, let's forget for a minute that the curves were actually shifted. Talk about the level of scientific integrity involved in allowing one's data to claim something as negative when you publicly state on the record that it was lousy data. That is highly unethical. But of course, when I asked MIT and President Invest to investigate, they went through a pro forma thing, hardly worth talking about, and they swept it under the table. When I left, I warned them. I said, this will not stand. Eventually, this will come out, and it will come out, and it will be highly damaging to your reputations and to the reputation of MIT, and that is going to happen. Professor Hagelstein, brilliant man, formerly of Lawrence Livermore National Lab, working on nuclear weapons. He left because he didn't like nuclear weapons and other matters back in '86, came back to MIT, a brilliant teacher. He could get tenure anywhere in the country if he wanted to. He had such a high reputation. Very good friend of mine now, by the way. I'm in awe of the man. He may be right or wrong about his theory of neutron transfer reactions. This was his closed-door meeting at MIT, April 14th, 1989. He was almost denied tenure because people objected to him working on cold fusion theories. Fortunately, he persevered, and he did get tenure. Pre-fusion age science research attempted to recreate the claims of Kitty Hawk and concluded man was not meant to fly. He would have been born with wings. Well, that's about it. Close came in and he gave his expose. That was the announcement, June 7th. Fateful day, turning point for me in my life anyway. I like to say about Frank, find Frank, he wasn't frank and he wasn't even close. His book is a travesty. Fortunately, it's not even well written, so no one will care about it. It goes into the trash bin of history. Taubes is very well written, I'll grant you that. Taubes is a hatchet man. He's already done hatchet jobs on other people. He thought he would do a little frisky hatchet job on cold fusion. That's his stock and trade, hatchet jobs. He's not a scientist. By the way, he, at the first cold fusion conference with 500 scientists gathered in Santa Fe, New Mexico, he was out there to kill it. He knew in advance what the answer was going to be. Why study it when you know the answer already? Someone told me an anecdote. I wasn't in there. He came up to the cafe, took an Alka-Seltzer out, threw it into a glass of water, and said, "Gentlemen, I give you cold fusion." That's his attitude toward cold fusion. And he went for the jugular vein. He accused Bacchus of tritium adulteration and this, that, and the other. Here's Close's book, Too Hot to Handle. The Race for Cold Fusion. It was republished by Princeton University Press, I believe, appropriately enough. This is the publishing fiasco of the century by Huizenga, who belittles. I love this. Isn't this great? 1 watt in, 4 watts out. The next version of this book, perhaps he'll put 1 watt in, 1,000 watts out. And it's a fine example of how not to do science. He was the head of the committee. It was his responsibility. He abdicated it. He should be, here he is, he should be hauled before the Congress and called to ask to task on why he was paid as a consultant to do this, when in advance of being hired, he said, don't have a panel because it's so stupid, it's going to go away, don't even waste your time. Then when it didn't go away, of course he came in and did his civic duty for the cause of science, and we got what we got. This man was almost a hero. He's hiding out. He threatened to resign from the panel. He was the co-chairman. He had just won the Nobel Prize in '89. He didn't want to muddy the waters. But he didn't also want his name on this report. He could see the report was going in a bad way, that it was concluding negatively when it shouldn't have. He threatened to resign. Huizenga wouldn't tolerate that. He gave him a reason to stay, gave him a preamble, a little loophole. He wanted complete death, but he got only partial death, that is Huizenga. Ramsey continues to be interested in cold fusion. Can you imagine? This guy, Ramsey, Nobel laureate of Harvard, he asked Julian Schwinger, who was very interested. Julian Schwinger's dead. Schwinger, in his last days, told me that Ramsey would ask him periodically, hey, Julian, what's going on with cold fusion? So he's interested in it, but what is he doing? Nothing. No civic responsibility. Julian Schwinger said, does cold fusion have a future? Forgot about that. I have little hope for it in Europe and the United States and the West. It is to the East, and especially to Japan, that I turn. 1990. It was around December 7th, by the way. I predicted that the U.S. might catch up, and probably will, because of the entrepreneurial spirit. Only because of the entrepreneurial spirit. Japan, in its very methodical, highly structured way, is doing the old stuff. Of course, when they find out about this SETI experiment, they're going to go ballistic. They are going to go absolutely ape. They will be making this in new forms, and they'll be putting it in cars faster than you can say Jack Sprat. They know how to measure power. Teller, where the heck is he? Nowhere. Okay, except on October 16th or so, 1989, there was a closed-door meeting in Washington, proceedings still not published, NSF-EPRI meeting, positive results. He came out and even said some positive things, but the whole thing got forgotten. Here's Maddox of Nature, another guy very responsible for why this whole thing was badly treated. He said, I think broadly speaking it's dead, and it will remain dead for a long, long time. I suspect he thought it would rise, and of course it has. And now he's no longer the editor of Nature, so he's, at least in his retirement, he'll have some fun. This was in October of '92 during the conference in Nagoya, Japan. Look at the title, Cold Fusion Produces Heat But No Papers. NTT researchers have no paper published or submitted to back up their claim. The company's public relations department could not even provide an abstract. What horse manure? There were abstracts all over the place. There was a paper. And here's our friend, our little smart friend, Steve Koonin of Caltech, who proved that cold fusion couldn't exist based on certain calculations of fusion probability, cross-sections, and so forth. He said, we're suffering from the incompetence and delusion of Drs. Pons and Fleischmann. He said that at that May meeting, the public hanging in Baltimore. The other thing about him is he said, another famous statement quoted in Fire from Ice, if pigs had wings, they could fly, but pigs don't have wings, and they can't fly. Well, Dr. Storms provided this modest art at the recent meeting. The flying pig does exist. We should have a flying pig award, he says. Huizenga here. Pigs can't fly because theory proves they do not have wings. Taubes, if this is a flying pig, my book will fail. Morrison, a really wacko physicist from CERN, who has racial theories, believe it or not, racial theories of the distribution of cold fusion results. Northern European countries did not get positive results, whereas southern countries along the Mediterranean and even the southern part of the U.S. got some positive results. And in the backwoods, outside the influence of the New York Times, he said this on national television, by the way, on a NOVA program, and he still goes on, and he'll go to his grave, I'm convinced, and I hope he does, convinced that cold fusion doesn't exist, because 3 out of 4 countries and 66% of pig owners do not have flying pigs. And Jones, who's a terrible man, he had he got the thing all off onto a bad start to begin with. Many reasons Jones has problems. Not the most important of which is he doesn't believe in measurements. He says he does, but he doesn't really. He's got something in for Pons and Fleischmann. There was bad blood, but he's not big enough to say, okay, now I agree the excess heat is real. Whatever it is, it's real. It can't be explained chemically. He's always volunteering. Oh, come to BYU, and I'll test out. He said this to SETI recently on the net. He said, come to BYU, and we'll test it out with our neutron meters and detectors, and we'll show where the nuclear products are. What he's out to do is to prove that if the nuclear products don't exist, then the heat doesn't exist. That's what he's out to prove. Good luck, Steve. In any event, this is what he said about cold fusion. Why are the people of every culture so anxiously embracing claptrap that should have been left behind? Part of the reason to be found in the uncritical acceptance and promotion of these notions by the media, prominent personalities, and government agencies. I don't see them promoting cold fusion, by the way. The cold fusion farce, this was in the same statement, should have been tossed into the trash heap long ago, but justifiable fear of legal actions by offended supporters has stifled opponents. I have never met James Randi coming to a cold fusion meeting. I've never known that he's cited the technical literature, but he is a magician, so he can do magic. At the risk of being unbearably realistic, I must tell you that Elvis Presley is dead, really dead. The sky is not falling. Perpetual motion is a chimera. Cold fusion is a dead duck. The earth is not flat, and the fault lies not in our stars, but in ourselves. And we're almost done with the slides, and then we'll go right on to this exciting tape. Bacchus, who was attacked for alchemy. Here's the Titanic. This is what's happening now to the opponents of cold fusion. They're going down. They're having some last-minute parties on the deck, but soon they will be taken care of in a big reservoir of fusion fuel. Okay, Jerry Bishop. Where's Jerry? I don't know. He wrote many articles. He's the best guy outside of yours truly covering cold fusion, but he did it nationally and was severely criticized. He won a Science Journalism Award. The physicists didn't want him to get the award. They held a conference. This was the American Physical Society. If you read Fire from Ice, you'll hear that episode. They gave it grudgingly, and they told him, don't write about cold fusion anymore, Jerry. So I guess he obeyed. He hasn't written anything since July 14th, 1994. Huh?
Must have paid him well not to write.
No, he's not payable, but he has an editor who's giving him a problem. This was in 91, November. Look at this. This guy who's not covering cold fusion at all, who thinks it's nonsense, Broad, writes, every time there's a breakthrough at Princeton here, big news, knee-jerk reaction, breakthrough, 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 but never any breakthrough in cold fusion because cold fusion is nonsense. Okay? Dyson said it the best. This is the essence of what's going to happen. There is no reason why a new technology has to develop like fission and hot fusion on a 30-year time scale. All it needs in order to go fast is small-size units, simple design, mass production, and a big market. He said that before the cold fusion era. Now we have it. It's sitting on a table. It's ready to go, and nothing will stop it. The knowledge is out there. God forbid if the mafia or the tokamak, whatever, got to them at SETI and blew up their lab or something. Everyone knows this now. All we have to do now, tinker is forever, now that it's all published and known about on the nets and what have you, just go to your basement, start cooking up beads, and eventually you'll get the reaction, you know? How many ways are there to coat beads? George Miley and his graduate students did it with ordinary nickel. Maybe they put copper on first, I don't know. Whatever, they got the heat. They got a little less intense reaction, but it started faster. By the way, that SETI demonstration, you have to start it with a heater. It has some heaters in it, thermal heaters, resistance heaters, 50 to 100 watts, just to get it going. Heat the water up. It's got a positive temperature coefficient, which means it gets better and better as it gets hotter. I predicted these things. Let's see how closely I came out. I predicted these things back in June of '94 at the SSE meetings, Society for Scientific Exploration, prototype demo units in the next 6 to 12 months. Pretty close, because that was after ICCF5. There was a demonstration unit there. I was a little off. Home heating units, prototype, pretty Pretty much, yep. It's not an actual home heating unit, but it's pretty close. Make 10 of them, put them in your basement, and your home is heated for a fraction of the cost of a light bulb. Electric generator by December 96, 100, I'm way off there. It's going to happen much sooner than that. By the way, they've generated electricity already. They haven't publicly announced it. The British Channel 4 will have an hour documentary that will make its way, we believe, over the sea. It will be broadcast on December 17th. It will show a small CT cell with thermoelectrics attached, running an small electric motor with a fan. So they have generated electricity already. Massive crow eating will occur. Don't know when that fest will be. We'll send out the crow, invest in crow. The messengers will be blamed, yes. Era of excuses begins in the attempt to rewrite history. It's already in process, but we won't let it happen because it's all on videotape, electronic mail, etc. Cold fusion-powered car prototype by 2000, radically off. Much sooner than that. The prototype, I imagine, will occur in 1996. A small vehicle of some sort, probably Dennis Cravens will do this. He's certainly working on it. A nice hot little baby that will run across the whole United States on nothing but water. And there will be TV crews following at that time, and I'm sure that will make a big splash. Let's look forward to that maybe next summer, let's say. Maybe it'll take a little longer. Who knows? In theory, if you had a crack team right now saying, we've got to make a car in 1 month, I bet you could do it. Tokamak will die. Probably, well, it's dying now. It's down to 240 million from 320. 96, certainly. Oil company stocks will plunge to unheard of lows after these prototypes. That can occur at any minute now. It's very unpredictable. When the big company announces, maybe after that, I don't know. Financial chaos will occur. It's good to have a little chaos every once in a while. Electric power grid begins to wither after home electric generators are introduced. Gradual end of all fossil fuel combustion. And phase out of fission nuclear power. 2 new books by me. Fire from Ice, or something like that. The Dawn of the Cold Fusion Age. Why MIT Slept. And that's it. Now we will go into the most shocking of all anomalies. Something that was brought, I will pass out the transcript of this actual TV broadcast that occurred in Japan on October 1993. I'm not sure this is correct, but if it is not correct, it is a terrible practical joke. Unfortunately, there's evidence, or fortunately, there's evidence indicating that it is by no, hand them out. It is by no means, it looks like it is by no means a practical joke, because one of the people on this film, Dr. Kawai, note where Kawai is on the film, so that you see, they have now got a United States patent. If you look at the latest issue of, you will see the patent. There's much more on that coming. This is the ultimate heresy that makes even cold fusion look pale in comparison. Let's see it anyway. And again, I'm not sure I believe this, but I'm increasingly of the opinion that it may be true. Because there are too many people getting this. It feels just like, to me, just like cold fusion felt in the beginning, is insane and madness. It's just that if you keep following it, eventually the proof comes out. But we just have to be scientists about it, not politicians. All right, this is in Japanese, which I think is better because it really gives you the effect of the reality of it when you hear it in Japanese. And you can go back and read it. This was translated by a highly competent